Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to another book review. Today I will be reviewing Friedrich Schiller's The Man Who Sees Ghosts. I believe it is also titled The Ghost Seer. This was a book that I believe was first published in 1789 by the very famous German playwright, poet, essayist, philosopher, and this was his only novel, The Man Who Sees Ghosts. I read it using my e-reader. There is the title page. I am a big fan of the tactile feel of used books. I like to smell the pages and write in the margins. Unfortunately, I am in Taiwan. I am at my middle school, and in order to bring my library with me, I had to downsize to an e-reader. In any case, I want to talk about this book. This was the first ever full work that I have read by Friedrich Schiller. Friedrich Schiller is an author that has long been on my list of authors to read ever since I started to study Jungian psychology by reading the great Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Carl Jung had in his very influential work Psychological Types, where Carl Jung sort of talked about the differences between extroverts and introverts in a lot of detail, and this great work, Psychological Types, gave birth to the Myers-Briggs test, which is, I believe, one of the most popular personality tests out there today. So this very influential work, before Carl Jung started to introduce his psychological typology, as he calls it, he went back through the literature and analyzed the various ways that some of the great minds of the past had tried to describe the differences in human personality. And there was one section that I found very fascinating, and that was basically it was these correspondence between Schiller, Friedrich Schiller, the author of this book that I will be discussing today as soon as I get through this, and Goethe. And he quoted Schiller's thoughts on personality, on the soul of man, how various it might be. And what I remember from that book, when I read this about 4 years ago, was that Schiller's psychological perspicacity, Schiller's observations on the psychology of man it was so eloquent what he said, and it seemed to me almost more insightful than what Carl Jung was writing himself, which is saying a lot, because I've always found Carl Jung to be incredibly genius in all of his works. But when he quoted Schiller, I was more captivated with what Schiller had written. However, at the time when I was living in America, I only bought books generally from my used bookstore, and I never came across Schiller. Finally, when I got this e-reader, I downloaded one of Schiller's books, and it is actually his only book, The Man Who Sees Ghosts. He is more known for his poems and his plays. I am more interested in reading novels. I will probably read his plays and his poems at some point. I do like to read and review poems as well, but I thought I would start off with his novel. I will say that The Man Who Sees Ghosts, or The Ghost Seer, I read that it was unfinished, and that makes a lot of sense. I tried not to read any of the reviews or anything about it. I wanted to read it for myself. I didn't want any preconceived ideas to be downloaded until I had made up my own mind of what I thought of this book. And I did find that it sort of ended a bit abruptly, and then when I read online that it was unfinished, that makes a lot of sense. I did also read online that this was Friedrich Schiller's most popular work during the time of his life. But that he himself, the author himself, was not a big fan of it. Perhaps that explains why he didn't finish it. I should also mention that Friedrich Schiller, born 1759, died in 1805. I read that although he was trained as a regimental doctor, he did suffer from many different forms of diseases throughout his life that he was constantly busy treating. So I guess you can't fault a man who dies young, relatively young, who has quite a lot happening in his life and in his health from not finishing a novel. But so why would I recommend you read an unfinished novel, The Man Who Sees Ghosts? Well, first I'll tell you, without spoiling the story, it reminded me very much of reading Sherlock Holmes in a certain way. There's this mystery and there's a lot of deduction. One of the main characters is a prince. He is the main subject. He is the central character around which all of these other major and minor characters sort of constellate around. This man is caught up in a lot of intrigue in the very affluent and very cosmopolitan city of Venice. This takes place in the 1700s, I'm assuming. There are a lot of very colorful characters. I believe he's a German prince. I assume so. Friedrich Schiller, in his writings, he sort of bleeps out the names of the place where this man is a prince and bleeps out his name as well. I don't know if that was just his own choice or that was a fashion of the day. But he is in Venice, and he undergoes all of these plots revolving around his character, and a lot of these plots are tied in with religion, occultism. At one point, there's a seance. There's this talk between Catholicism and apostasy of leaving your church. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to talk too much. At one point, one of the characters falls in love. In fact, I want to get this. Let me explain something. So the story itself is a mystery story. It's a story of the occult. It's a story of secret societies. It's a story of intrigue. There's a lot of suspense. It's well written, but I would say as an overall story, it wasn't like the best story in the world. I prefer a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories, in fact. But what I will say was that Schiller's writing, the way that Schiller captured some feelings and some moments and some scenes were just so darn beautiful that I do recommend it. I recommend it simply for the beauty of Schiller's feeling, his sensibility, the way that he conveys, in particular, this falling in love. The prince falls in love. I'll at least spoil that part. I want to read how he writes it, as well as some other sections of the book that I did highlight. So basically, the book's pretty darn good. It's unfinished. If you like mystery books, apparently this was a very influential book, The Man Who Sees Ghosts, or The Ghost Seer, in terms of lodge books about secret societies, and also Gothic-themed books. I'm not an expert on that, but Friedrich Schiller was a very influential writer, very famous in his own days, and his fame has endured. I believe there's a museum dedicated to him in Germany, as well as probably many other landmarks and perhaps festivals and stuff like that. So he's definitely one of the greats that I was happy to read. But it's his writing, the way that he nails it. Unfortunately, it is a translation. It is not in his actual native tongue. So for this next section of the video, I just wanted to read some of the words, some of the sentences, and then talk about it. So here, this is in book 1, and it is describing the prince's personality. In the midst of a noisy melee of people, he walked alone, shut off in the world of his imagination. He was often a stranger in the real world. I don't know if you've ever felt that that around you is a melee of people, in the midst of a noisy melee of people. Sometimes I look around and it just does seem like that. I mean, people are honking, people are going, the kid is crying, the old woman with the bowed legs is like wobbling. with her. I mean, just a constant noisy confusion around me. Sometimes it all makes sense, but sometimes it is a noisy melee of people, and I have felt alone, shut off in the world of my imagination, a stranger in the real world. I don't really like that feeling. I like to feel like I really belong in the real world, and hopefully I do belong in the real world. But I did like that because I have definitely felt that. So I wonder if you felt that before. Put it down in the comments if you had. Here is another quote. This is also from book 1. "It is really laughable," he said, "that a madman is able to shatter a man's peace with 2 words." But this is in relation to a man who sort of accosts the prince in a crowd and says a couple words, and the prince radically changes his mood, his inside, and his peace is shattered. This idea, I don't know if you've ever felt a certain way. Maybe you're happy, maybe you're upbeat, maybe you're normal. I don't know what it is, how you felt inside, but someone said 2 words to you and suddenly everything inside you changed. Your peace was shattered. And I guess words have the ability to have the opposite effect. You might be feeling down and then someone says 2 words to you and then suddenly your mood is lifted and your peace is restored. I like this line. "It is really laughable," he said, "that a madman is able to shatter a man's peace with 2 words." I like this line because it just shows the power of words, that words are like spells. You can use your words to lift someone up. You can use your words to throw someone down. But it talks about how we also give license to people, that it is really laughable that a madman is able to shatter a man's peace with 2 words, that we allow people to use their words to shatter our peace. I find very fascinating. And the last one, this is where the prince has entered a dark, I believe at a Catholic church, and he's escaping the heat of the hot day, the sultry day, I believe is how it is described. And he sees this beautiful Madonna-esque, not Madonna the material girl, but Madonna as in a very virtuous woman who is kneeling in prayer. And he looks upon her, and she is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. And, I believe how much art, how much literature has been devoted to capturing beauty, to capturing that spell of beauty, that spell that thrusts us into love. I just really liked his words. I've only chosen a very small section. In fact, the whole there's several pages of it and all of it is so beautiful. And it might be a little fancy or old-timey for you, or too poetic for you, but I don't believe anyone captures beauty like the poets. And Friedrich Schiller was a great poet, and this nailed it, cinched his reputation for me. So, the prince comes in, sees this beautiful Madonna. He says, "She prayed to her God, and I prayed to her. Yes, I worshipped her. All those pictures of the saints, those altars, those burning candles, they did not prompt me to feel this, but now for the first time it overcame me as if I were in a shrine. Shall I confess to you? At this moment I believed unshakably in him whose image her beautiful hand was holding. I read his answer in her eyes. Thanks to her lovely devotion, she made him real to me. In following her, I passed through all his heavenly abode." This, to me, perhaps it doesn't make sense to you because you didn't read the pages around it. So I'll explain it to you, and then if you go back and listen to it, maybe it will make a little bit more sense. This idea of you walk into a temple or a church, you hear the organ music, you smell the incense if your church or temple burns incense, you hear the recitation of some holy verses, the singing of hymns, And what is the purpose of it? Is the purpose just to say it? No, the purpose is to invoke that religious feeling. And that religious feeling, hopefully inside, is some sort of experience of God, experience of awe, experience of oneness with the divine, right? That's the point of religious rituals in general and religious holy sites, is to connect with God, is to understand God, is to understand why people who came up with a word like hallelujah, and and what the prince is saying here, he's saying all those pictures of the saints, those altars, those burning candles, they did not prompt me to feel this. Feel what? Feel this feeling that he's feeling now. This feeling that now for the first time, it overcame me as if I were in a shrine. At this moment, I believed unshakably. Sometimes you go to church and you're trying to get into the feeling. You're trying to get into the connection. You're trying to understand, what does it mean, God is love? Oh yeah, that makes logical sense. Or yeah, I think I know what it means. Or you're trying to push yourself to believe, But this is, I believed unshakably in him, whose image her beautiful hand was holding. I read his answer in her eyes. He's finally meeting God, is what he's saying. He's finally meeting God. Who is God? God is love. He is falling in love with her. The connection between the religious experience and falling in love. It wasn't the candles. It was this beautiful woman's devotion to God, that this sight of, and it goes into, he ends up trying to find this girl. There's a whole affair to do with this that is part of the story. But I love this image, and I don't want to read the whole thing, otherwise that would just be me reading. But if any of that makes sense to you, I for myself, the closest I have ever been to God was when I was looking into the face of people that I loved, like I was in love with, whether that was my little baby daughter or my wife during our better moments. That's a feeling of God, like extreme love. That's where that religious feeling where, oh my God, I don't want to say anymore, because this is just a book review. Anyways, I thought I wanted to share this book. It was kind of an interesting book because it was unfinished, and the story itself I didn't find to be necessary. It was a very interesting story. You might like it. It's very gothic. There's a little talk about perhaps secret societies. There's occultism, seances, trickery. There's a lot of logic deduction, a lot of battling between feelings and reason. But I guess for me, some passages, particularly this when the prince falls in love with this beautiful Madonna, and then it goes on further. If you liked any of that, about how he is a changed man from then on, in that falling in love. Because we're lucky if it happens to us. Hopefully it happens to everyone before we die. But it is the most powerful experience, in that it's the same experience, in my experience, of meeting God. And when you have that experience, I believe some of those old scriptures like God is love finally makes sense, whereas, before you're going through the Bible lessons, or what if it's Islam or whatever, you're going through all of these religious things and you're trying to you're getting it programmed in you through Sunday school, but it doesn't really make sense. And then finally, when you fall in love or you have this powerful experience, it makes sense. That's amazing. Really cool. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. My name's Ryan Freeman. Bye-bye.